right, welcome back. We're going to be talking about another Kickstarter, and we have another returning guest. I think this is his, let's see, it's probably his third time because the first time we talked, he was doing it was about a Kickstarter about a pizza anthology.
Mhm.
And then we were talking about his book, A Real Slobber Knocker. And now we're talking about something a little bit different, Feed Them to the Crows, which is a horror thriller comic. Welcome back, James. How's it going?
Good, Chad. Thank you very much. I'm glad for the three-peat here.
Well, after the fifth time, you get like access, to the green room, and you know. But
Craft
so how's
services.
it? Yeah. So how's it been? I think the last time we actually met face to face was at New York Comic Con last year,
That's
in
right.
the midst of the cacophony that is, Artist Alley.
Yes, it's still the one convention I make sure to go to every year, and it's still a blast. Even attending as a pro now instead of press is a different experience, but it's still cool just to walk around that space. So
Mm.
wouldn't miss it.
Well, for anybody that hasn't seen one of our interviews before, why don't you kind of fill us in about your history as a comic book reader and uh, work as a creator, and also within the other things you've done within the industry.
Yeah, I've worn quite a few hats. I think starting, as a kid, I got really into comics more from like the animated series that came out in the mid '90s, as well as really the Marvel trading cards. I think I learned more about what happened in Marvel comics from the trading cards than I did from the actual comic books as a kid. So just like I obsessively collected those and read through those. Fell out of it in high school and got back in during college and was reading voraciously since. And then I reviewed comics for over 12 years through two different websites, Horror DNA and ComicCon.com. Learned quite a lot there, and that was kind of like a boot camp of comic book lessons. So if anyone is curious as to how to make a comic book or what goes into a comic book, look at comics from a critical lens. It's not a matter of like, this is a thumbs up or this is a thumbs down. It's more like what worked, what didn't, why, and think through those kind of things. And a few years ago, I kind of got to a point where I'm like, I can't do press anymore. I'm like, I've been itching to do my own stuff, and I put down the press hat and started writing my own stuff. So I'd started with shorts, had a number of anthologies. I've been in about a dozen or so since, with stories ranging from 3 pages to 8 pages long. And I had a mini series in the works with the Real Slobber Knocker. 2 issues are done of that. The third issue is going to come later this year. And launching my second mini series that I co-wrote called Feed Them to the Crows with Mario Candelaria. And really looking forward to this one, getting out there in the world. This is an idea that Mario and I put together a few years ago, and it's finally coming to fruition. And we're live on Kickstarter now with the first issue.
And we've I think this past Saturday was the first Saturday that we were following it over on the site, and I think I forgot to let you know about that.
I appreciate it anyway. So, thanks.
But so yeah, tell us a little bit more about the book and kind of what the inspiration behind it.
Yeah, Feed Them to the Crows is a story about a young man named Mitch who, when he was about 12 or 13 years old, saw his mother die. It's a really traumatic event, and Mitch has carried this memory and obsessed about it since that day, but he is convinced that his mother was killed by a vampire. So that is this energy, this emotion that is fueling everything, every facet of his being, and he's just been obsessed about this and finding this and proving that his mother was killed by a vampire. And no one believes him except his little brother Jake. And Jake was much younger when all this happened, so he has this kind of chance at a normal life. He remembers his mother, but doesn't have the same kind of core memory of this, traumatic event. And the first issue picks up with Buster, the would-be vampire, rolling back into town, and Mitch now puts his revenge fantasy, his revenge theory into play with the beginning of this book, and going down this path that is going to change his life forever, for better or worse.
Now, this is from the other books that we've talked about. This is in a whole new genre. I mean, the pizza anthology was more of a slice of life.
Yep.
Um, and then the Slobberknocker was it shows your love for wrestling. Is horror and thriller stuff also one of your favorite go-to genres?
Yeah, since I wrote for Horror DNA for so long, I really figured I would just be a horror guy. I grew to love and appreciate horror. I think I started into it and I'm like, all right, I like it enough. But then having spending so much time reviewing horror comics and seeing what scared me, what didn't, what worked in that kind of setting, I developed a real admiration for it, and I certainly had other horror ideas, but just Slobberknocker was the first one that came together in a way like that, and so now Feed Them to the Crows was my first real foray into the genre in that capacity. I've done a couple of shorts that were horror oriented. This one's more of a horror thriller. I have another series that will come right after Feed Them to the Crows called Cleanup Crew. That's more of a horror comedy. So, because that there's always that saying that the line between horror and comedy is just like is a very fine one, or is it no? It's tragedy is the one with it's comedy is tragedy plus time, but horror and comedy, like, you could, with the right move, you could turn it one way or another. So I've had that idea in my head for a while, but so there's a couple other ones that I'm working with. I think what I found is that I don't want to get pigeonholed into one genre. I like being able to, like, ideas come from all over the place. So and ultimately it's like, well, whatever feels fully baked, like I had this one idea for another story that's going to be more of like a crime slick comedy, kind of like in the vein of Pineapple Express. And I had the opening scene for this for a year. And I just knew the exact opening scene, and I loved this scene. I was like, this is so perfect. And I had nothing else. I didn't know where it went. I didn't know what else to do with it. I had that scene, and I obsessed about that scene for so long in my head. And so finally, like, something popped into my head. I'm like, oh, that's where it has to go. That's where it has to go. So I started filling in all the pieces for it, and that'll be the next one that I work on after this one.
So when you're approaching the horror comic book and like the pro wrestling storyline, is there a different frame of mind you have to get yourself into when you're writing?
I think it's more about the characters with that. So while I always start with a premise where it's like, wouldn't it be cool if this happened, kind of thing, the characters are what drive that story. So in the case of Slobberknocker, it's Brett and Jake, these two wrestlers, these two best friends who have grown apart, and that those feelings about having friends as an adult can be difficult, right? Like, in the best of circumstances, let alone when you're the world champion in a major wrestling organization. In the case of Crows, it's Mitch and feeling that, like, I think everyone's kind of had an experience as a kid where, like, no one believes you about something, and you're convinced you're telling the truth, and this happened, and just for whatever reason, no one's believing you. But now extrapolate that to some horrible event like this with Mitch's mother passing away, and how that can affect somebody. And I compared it in another interview to Inside Out, right, where it's like those core memories that come through. It's like his only core memory. It's like the only thing that's really, like, fueling him for this, and it's all gone dark. And the way, when we were working with our colorist Colin Johnson on this, we were trying to figure out the right colors for it, and I described it as like the sun hasn't risen for Mitch since his mother passed away. So it's been that kind of dark and dingy and gritty kind of feel, and that was the tone we were going for. Where the scenes where Mitch interacts with Jake are lighter or brighter. It's like this like, it's not totally the sun, but it's a bright spot in Mitch's life. That's like the one area of normalcy for it. So it's, again, so a roundabout way of saying it's a lot of characters for it, and getting into the heads of the characters helps to dictate the way the story progresses.
And is it different, writing with a partner as opposed to, writing by yourself?
Yes, very much so. I think this is the first one. Working with Mario was a lot of fun. I had previously worked with him as an editor for some of his series like Kilchella and One True Love, which was just released through Kickstarter. And that was more about me giving notes on his script, and he ultimately he was the writer and he was going to do whatever he wanted to do, but I was saying, hey, this didn't make sense, or like maybe change this, or I have a lot of questions about things. Whereas this was it was a true collaboration in that we had an outline, and then one of us went through and wrote out the panel descriptions, and then the other person went in and wrote dialogue, and then we kept switching, and we kind of go back and forth. So for the most part, there's a couple of pieces where I know that was me or that was Mario, but overall, I couldn't tell you, oh, like Mario wrote all of this and I wrote all of that. There's a couple of scenes where I know like Mario's really particular about cars, so he's like very specific about the car that Mitch drives in the book. Um, so that was a different kind of experience, but it's also like you have a partner in that. Whereas like you're certainly working with artists to say I want to do this, I want to do that, and you want to make sure that you're writing to things that an artist that they want to do and that it works to their strength. Whereas the script, it's like if you're working by yourself, it's like, well, I mean, I guess this makes sense. Yes, that's why editors are so valuable. It's like a neutral third party there to kind of tell me, like, am I doing this right, or am I just staring at it so right and I'm just so happy and patting myself on the back all the time about how great, how smart I am, and how great of a writer I am.
And how did you get connected with the rest of the creative team?
Yeah, so Mario and I have been gone back for quite a bit. So he's my like in my like small group, right? So there's always indie creators. You should find your people. These are like folks that are coming up along with you. And Mario had some previous releases through things like Z2 Comics. He had a book out through them, and Alterna back in the day, and a couple of other spots. So I had connected with him first as a creator, and I had interviewed him, and then so that's how we kind of got connected. And he was in this kind of small group that we ultimately made the Slices of Life, the pizza book together as writers. Daniel Cavill, who is the artist for this, we had been looking for an artist for some time for Feed Them to the Crows, and it just because we wrote this several years ago, and we just never found a home for it. Nothing felt right. And then it kind of lost some steam, but it was something that was always kind of sit in the back of the Google Drive folder. And it's like, I really want to come back to this. It's done, right? 3 issues that were all fully written. And someone had shared Daniel's contact info and his work on Blue Sky. I looked through his portfolio a little bit. I said, this could work. I shared it with Mario, and he was on board. I reached out to Daniel, and it turns out he had drawn a book called From Parts Unknown, written by Adriano Arignello, which I'm buddies with him through the Comics Launch course, and then I read his book. That's a great book that's going to be out in comic book stores real soon. It's about vampire pro wrestling. So it's a great mix thing. So I'm like, this makes total sense. I reached out to Daniel. He was on board. He jumped right into the book. So I was actually expecting this book to come out later in the year, but Daniel worked really quickly, and we were way ahead of things. I said, oh, like I got to find a colorist right away. And it turns out I had worked with Colin Johnson for Cleanup Crew, which is the next book I have coming out later. And he was doing great work there. And I said, would you be up for coloring this one? And he jumped in, and both Daniel and Colin take feedback really well. So whether it's like the look of a character or the color setting, Colin did 4 different passes on coloring on the test page for us to go like, is it this? Is it this? And he had such a brilliant way of just describing the colors and his approach to it that I'm like, I got to work with this guy all the time now. He's really, really great. So both of them, I quick plug, like, yes, they're fast, they're efficient, take great feedback, and they're open for work. So if you have anyone's looking for artists or colorists, I can't recommend them enough.
So is there a certain character in the story that you kind of attached to, or found easier to write because you said you guys are trading off writing? It was easier or more difficult to write?
I think Mitch was surprisingly easy because of that, I don't know, like that teen angst. Like everyone's kind of been through that kind of like rough phase. Like I'm going through now. I have a 13-year-old at home, so like I'm dealing with that at home.
I have a 9-year-old, and we're going through that. So
yeah. So I get it, and so but that kind of like, again, that frustration at the world, right? Like where it's like you're just kind of mad at everything. I felt, I chronicled or channeled my inner goth kid from when I went through all those phases for it. Like, I remember all that. just like mad at the world for nothing. Like it's like and my problems were nothing compared to what Mitch is dealing with, right? But that feeling of that again frustrated at the entire world, that I found Mitch to be really easy to write in that perspective, and it felt like so much more, I don't know, like not necessarily a connection, but like I understood where he was coming from more.
Mhm.
Whereas Buster, our vampire, I'm like, is he just an a-hole? Like, like what is it about him that's like we have to have just enough mystery as to like what is he, where is he coming from, that kind of stuff. I'm not getting into like a full secret origin for him, but like or is he just is he just a dirtbag? Is this where we're at with it? So he was a little bit more challenging, but like once you kind of like figure out things like most of the bad guys in the show Justified, I'm like, yeah, it's basically him, I guess.
So, since you're writing about vampires, are there any, authors that you know, enjoy their work, horror work, that maybe inspired you, or, yeah, I guess inspired. I'm not, not that you're like imitating,
Yeah.
imitating, but, um, you know, did, I get, yeah, inspired
Yeah.
your,
Well, I've been going through like and trying to reread or read some of the Stephen King books that I've missed. So I actually just read Salem's Lot for the first time just a couple months ago, kind of in preparation for promoting Feed Them to the Crows. So that was a good way of kind of putting myself back in the mindset of the vampire mythos kind of thing. But I like the more alternative approaches, I think, to vampires. Not necessarily like the Twilight kind of stuff, but more of like from a comic book perspective. I know I'm blanking on the name of it, but a few years ago, Tim Seeley had written a book. I think it came out through Dark Horse, and it was a vampire book. But what struck me was the way the art was done. The vampires, it's like their teeth, like their teeth were too big for their mouths, so their teeth were
Mhm.
just like gigantic and just so terrible. Like you think of the Little Red Riding Hood, like, oh, what big teeth you have. It was like, oh my goodness, like it was like wolf teeth in like a man's mouth, and it just really like freaked me out for that. And I hate that I'm blanking on the name of this now, but like it was so cool. And that coupled with, I think that was through Dark Horse, and I know Jonathan Mayberry had a book called Bad Blood that was another comic where just a brilliant premise where a vampire bites a kid who's going through chemo treatment, and the blood is like poison to the vampire. So the vampire is going around trying to kill people, and yet this kid finds out that his blood is poison to him because he's dealing with cancer. And it was like, what a great like weird idea. And this vampire came back after like hundreds of years. He woke up and he's like, oh, I gotta go out here. Like, oh, this young kid, I'm gonna totally dive into here. And he's like, oh, what is this crap that everyone's eating? So those kind of alternate takes where it's like a different spin to what you're used to seeing versus the old school Dracula thing. Like there's always going to be a place for that classic, but I want to see those different spins on it. So that's how I'm looking at something like Feed Them to the Crows, and that's how I'm looking at Cleanup Crew, which is the book that I'll have coming out after in between issues 1 and 2 of Crows will be Cleanup Crew 1.
So, what are you offering, for reward levels for the campaign?
Yeah, so we have the book itself, obviously. So digital copies in PDFs as low as $5. The standard cover, Daniel did a great cover that was really done in the style of the Reckless books from Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. That was really the motif we were looking for. So a lot of like characters and rearranged and kind of a classic look to it. And Roberto Duke did an awesome Tales from the Crypts homage cover that was meticulously designed when he put all this together, and like the really details about like the little circles that were on here, like where it would have said 12 cents kind of thing. Did a great job. And what I'll be sharing in the next few days is he did a time lapse photo of him inking the whole cover. So we actually offered the original artwork for that, and it sold within the first day, which I'm happy about because there was a high reward tier, but I'm also bummed about because I kind of wanted it for myself, so I was going to try to buy it myself from him. But I'm glad that it went quick for that. So that original artwork is gone, but everyone can catch up on the back catalog for myself and Mario. So we put all of our old stuff available for at a discount. So if you want to pick up older some of our previous books, or or bundle a bunch of them together, that's all there for us too. It was weirdly difficult creating the reward tiers for this book because we only have one variant cover. I'm not like a huge variant guy, and we only have one variant cover, but the book is completely done. Whereas when I did the campaigns for a real Slobberknocker, the book wasn't finished, so we had the opportunity to have people drawn into the book itself, which is a high reward tier, and those went really helped fund the campaign. This book is completely done, so I have the book itself, and I'm trying to create that collectability certainly. And we looked at other things to kind of put together, and it ultimately came down to like the book and the books that we have already that we've made. So it was a little more of a challenge in building that. So I think we'll have an easier path when we get into the subsequent issues for it, because we'll have the previous issues, catch up tiers, that kind of stuff.
So, having said that, how has the experience with this one so far been compared to your other Kickstarter journeys?
It's actually been a little humbling. I figured, I'm not looking to raise a ton of money for it. In the previous campaigns, for Slobberknocker, I think I raised a little over $3,000 each, and Slices was like 4,500. This one, we set the goal for 1,500, and we're not quite there yet. We're over a week into the campaign, and again, part of it is I think the reward tiers were a little lower than what we've been in the past, and fewer options, but also just like Kickstarter is a very different space now, or in the world is a very different space now than the last time I ran a campaign a year ago. So it's weird. So it's a weird experience to kind of get out there, and it's like, oh well, this is a brand new series and a first issue, and it's completely done, and all the things that I thought would just be an easy sell are a little bit more of an uphill. So definitely posting a lot more on social media, definitely trying to get the word out there a lot more. And you can't rely on social algorithms and stuff. And, there's still people I encounter where they're like, you make comic books? I'm like, what else do you know about me? Like, how did those things not line up that like you haven't heard about those things? But it's a strange time for an indie creator. So definitely appreciate folks like yourselves, Chad, trying to get the word out, and other creators who just kind of like share stuff. Like JP Jordan, out of the blue, just like shared. He's like, these are all the Kickstarter campaigns I backed, and these are the things you should check out. He shared all that on Blue Sky, and he plugged Feed Them to the Crows, which I really appreciated. And it's like, you don't have to do that, but like that's the kind of cool stuff that like is out there in the indie comics community. That there's a lot of cool people that are ready, willing, and able to like. Everyone's going through this together, so be able to go like, hey, I know in the little things about sharing your campaign like that can go a long way, because you never know when someone's going to see something, or that you vouching for something, going, hey, I backed this. This is cool. You should check it out. That can go a long way with getting someone else on board.
So I don't know if I've asked you this in our previous interviews, but how, and you mentioned it at the beginning, but how has your time as a reviewer helped you as a writer of your own stuff?
Yeah. Ultimately, I just figured out what worked and what didn't. So I'm sure everyone's kind of had an experience where they read a comic book and they're like, man, I really wish if they just did this, or I really wonder what happened with that, and or like it looked like it was going in one direction and then it just took a turn. And you're like, oh well, that kind of didn't live up to its expectations, right? It's happened over and over again. So I found that fuel about like it, not necessarily thinking, well, if I wrote Spider-Man, this is what I would do, right? I'm not kind of going down that path per se, but just kind of thinking about those things about like, well, all right, well, if I was in that situation, or if I had a character like that, how would I kind of play that? I remember I watched, it extends to other stuff too, because like I found sometimes you can't get it out of your head once you kind of get into that mentality. And I remember I watched that movie Stakeland, which is a vampire movie, and I don't even remember anything about this movie. I just know that it was a vampire movie, but I know that immediately after it, I went, they should have totally did this. And I started writing all this stuff down. All of a sudden, I'm like, well, vampires, and this is another thing. I don't know if any of that ended up in Crows, because again, I can't remember anything about that movie right now. But like, it's stuff like that where I think you just kind of figure it out, and and plus, like frankly, you get to talk to a lot of really cool people. So I remember talking to people like Josh Williamson, like when he just made Nailbiter and Ghosted before he jumped into DC and was writing Superman and all this stuff. I was like, how do you start writing?
Before it became a little popular, you know.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know, he's only writing Iron Man and Superman right now, but like whatever. But I remember asking like, how do you start? He's like, you just write it down. I was like, what do you mean? Like, how does that work? The starting part was the hump I couldn't quite get over. And I remember he told me start small. He told me specifically watch episodes of The Twilight Zone. Like those are all like compact short stories. Like start small and then you start to grow from there. I'm like, oh. So I always think back of Twilight Zone and stuff like that, where like, you know, to start out in like the self-contained spot.
I was gonna say, I mean, I enjoyed the Twilight Zone, and you know, I plowed through the however many seasons of Black Mirror are on Netflix, and you know, it's like, you know, I like those self-contained stories that kind of just take something so simple and just make it uncomfortable.
Yeah. Sometimes that's all you need is that little twist. That's why I said I typically start with the premise of a story. I know a lot of folks start the other way. Well, they'll start with characters, but I'll start with the premise, and then I'm thinking about, well, how can you bring that story out? How can you get the most from that? What is the kind of character that would encapsulate the themes I'm trying to explore and things like that? So that's when the people start to inhabit the world, and like and it's not a matter of like, well, I need a villain, so let me just go through here and pick out this guy. You know, it's like thinking of those personalities and why they would be a good, you know, clash for some of those things, and what would make for an interesting story.
Now you've kind of mentioned, you know, a couple, but do you have any favorite vampire movies?
I mean, I love like the classics like Fright Night and Lost Boys. Those are definitely in the mix of it. I really liked more recently. I think it was Renfield, the one with Nicolas Cage, where he was like Dracula, and there was like just a bizarre kind of feel to it. So that was just more of a fun aspect to it versus like the traditional like, whoa, I'm gonna suck your blood kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if I don't. I know you're again into, you know, books and audiobooks and stuff, but I just finished. It was on Audible. It was like classic vampire stories, which is really interesting because it was like around before, you know, before Dracula and stuff like that. So, but it was interesting. I mean, it was a little rough in spots, but you know, it was nice to see that the, you know, vampire stories weren't just, you know, Dracula, which I'm listening to now.
Well, yeah, it's funny to think of like what vampire lore was like before Dracula. Like so much is kind of taken from that story, and the setup for it versus like, you know, Bram Stoker pulled from something to create all this
stuff. So, anything else about the campaign that you wanted to make sure that people knew about?
Yeah, just to confirm again, the book is done. So there's 3 issues planned for Feed Them to the Crows. The first issue is 100% completed. So right after the campaign ends, we will go to print. Digital copies will go out to people via email or via Kickstarter message. And we're already most of the way done with the second issue. So we're plowing right through it. Daniel's been awesome. And Colin's been working on the colors already. So we're expecting all of the inked pages in actually by the end of this week. So we will be coloring throughout next month or so. So what's going to happen is when this book goes out to people, there will be a QR code at the back of the book to scan and sign up for the second issue. So it's a really cool spot to be in, and that people won't have to wait too long in between the campaigns to get the next issue. That was one thing that in hindsight, I wish that I was able to kind of abbreviate the time between issues for a real slobberknocker, but you know, it takes, sometimes comics just takes a little while. So in this case, you know, we'll go right into it. My plan is by the end of the year, certainly we'll have the second issue. I'm trying to abbreviate that as much as possible, but we'll have the second issue out to people, you know, pretty soon after. So you can jump right in if you like what you read, hop right back in with the second issue and then the third finale. So it's a lot of fun, this book, and fun in like a way that, you know, with like blood and guts kind of thing, not like, you know, horrible things that these people go through.
Are you, reading anything, comic wise that you're really enjoying currently?
I've been trying to read through Batman from Nightfall to the present, and
Hmm.
I'm up to about No Man's Land right now. So it takes a little while because I counted and there's 9 separate series that you have to kind of go
Yeah,
keep track of
we
over
have to
that.
go Detective Robin. Um, yeah,
Yeah, like
just
Batman, Shadow of the Bat,
Shadow the Bat. Yeah,
Legends of the Dark Knight, and then you got like Catwoman, Nightwing, Azrael. There's a lot, so it's
and
been
then well,
fun
you have you have
missing.
you have Knight's End, Knight's Quest.
Yeah, so I went through all of those like last year, and I was going through them, but sometimes like it's just well, like what is it? Contagion. I think it was one series where
Yeah,
that's like 14 chapters long, and it was bouncing between them. And I realized,
Robin.
oh well, it's going to Robin, but I'm 5 issues behind on Robin, so I had to catch up on those and go through. DC Infinite's been great for that, but it's been this kind of slow piece, and like I'll read through like 30 issues of Batman over the weekend. I'm like, I just need a little bit of a break from Batman, and I'll go read something else, and then I'll come back. But so it's been slow going to kind of go through, but it's been great. Like I haven't read any like duds, right? Like all of
Mhm.
those books, all 9 of them have been really cool. Even Azrael, which is I was like, I don't know, like what's his deal, but he's really grown on me. He's like a weird,
Yeah,
like, I love the underdog kind of guy, and like, and I was always curious, like, why did he get the role of Batman in Nightfall? But why Nightwing was right there, but then I realized no, he wasn't during that time. He
yeah.
wasn't right there. So I'm like, oh, okay, that all makes sense. And like this guy who just kind of came in, and he was like, the cool '90s Batman for a hot minute.
Well, that was my really when I one day after I got home from school, I was looking at the paper because I was a nerd. But there's like, oh, there's going to be a new Batman, and so immediately I went and got the first issue of Nightfall at the local grocery store, and since then it's been downhill.
I hear you. Yeah, but it's weirdly fond memories of it. I actually picked up a couple of Azrael figures for him. There's a surprisingly amount of there's like 6 of them. So I'm like, all right, might as well.
I even have the poster of him in the new bat suit before they went all metal, but he's holding the cape and the cowl in his
Yeah,
so.
it's pure '90s nostalgia, but I'm running with it so far. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Well, why don't you give one last pitch for the campaign and where people can find you on the social media if you're there?
Yeah, so Feed Them to the Crows is on Kickstarter now. We wrap up on May 20th, so still plenty of time to jump in. We do have some stretch goals planned once we hit that goal, the actual funding goal, including adding some more to the book and some extra goodies for folks that back. So please jump in. As I said, the book is completely done. So it's part supernatural, part Fright Night, part little things in the way that we're approaching this one. So if you like any of those things, definitely worth checking out. As for me, best spot for me is on Blue Sky. It's James Ferg Comics or Substack, which is the same one, James Ferg Comics. And if you sign up to my Substack, I'll send you a PDF of A Real Slobber Knocker #1 right away, right after you sign up for it. So you can check out my pro wrestling comic right away and get ready for that finale when that comes out later this year.
Well, we'll definitely have to uh, get together for that or whenever your next thing is, and I'm sure we'll make sure that we run into each other at New York Comic Con this year.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks again, Chad.
And,
Appreciate it.
and we'll continue to follow the campaign over on Comic Watch in our weekly roundup, which is the corner, and it's every Saturday at noon. And this interview will be over here. And it's great catching up with you, and always a pleasure. So I'll let you enjoy the rest of your evening, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Sounds good. Thanks.